Brandon here, Berserker Off-Road. My Jeep just rolled 40,000 miles, so I have a bit of maintenance to take care of. Now, I have a 2020 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. It's a 3.6 automatic, and I've taken it on quite a lot of adventures. And on this channel, I speak a lot about reliability and doing things to the vehicle to keep the weight down so you maximize that reliability so it doesn't let you down on the trail. Now, at home, that means you need to keep up your end of the deal and take care of the vehicle. So that's what I'm doing today. I've got quite a few things to take care of. Some of these are part of the maintenance schedule. Others are just things I'm doing on my own because I know I'm quite hard on this vehicle and I'm doing some of these prematurely. And some of these I'm just curious to see how things are. So anyway, today I've got an oil change, tire rotation, air filter, then I'm also pulling the diff fluid. I'm replacing the transfer case fluid, just doing some general inspections around the vehicle. I've noticed when I've been on the trail lately, there's like a burning oil smell, so I want to investigate that. And then just some other odds and ends. And I'll take you through all that and what I generally do when I do some maintenance on a vehicle. These are just things that I do. I recommend, you look up the best practices for things, but this is just how I do my vehicle maintenance. So let's get to it. Because I was doing so much work today, I put each corner on a jack stand. Now, it's a good idea if you do have your vehicle on jack stands and you pull the tires off, go ahead and put that tire underneath the frame. That way, if the jack stand does fail, the wheel will catch the frame before it crashes to the ground. If you're under the vehicle, you'll appreciate you did that. My Falcon Wild Peak MT tires have 35,000 miles on them, and looking at them, they still have great tread wear. It's nice and even down the tread surface. They don't have any cupping. There's still decent tread depth, and that's not bad for 35,000 miles on a mud terrain tire. Now, a few things have helped me keep these tires in such great shape. Part of that is rotating my tires every 5,000 miles. Every time I rotate my oil, I change my tires, anyway. And I do a 5-tire rotation. So I rotate my spare into the rotation. So that way, one of my tires gets a break for 5,000 miles. So that helps, stretch out the overall lifespan of my set of tires. Another thing is keeping my tires properly inflated. When I'm driving around, not expecting to go off-road, I'm at 37 PSI. When then of course I air down in a wheel, but then if I need to drive a significant distance, like back to a campsite or something, I take the time to air back up to 37. Not 20, not 26, not 30, 37. That ensures that my tires have a good even wear. If you're driving around on low air pressure, like, if you're gonna drive 60 miles on, 20 PSI, thinking, oh, I'm just back to camp real quick. Well, that heat breaks down the tire carcass. Think about it. You have these steel belts inside the tire, and when you have that compression and decompression as it's bending and warping as it's spinning around, that builds up heat, and that prematurely wears the tire carcass. And so when you are driving back to camp or whatever after wheeling, make sure you air your tires back up to the proper tire pressure, no matter how long it takes. That will help prolong the life of your tires, and so they last a lot better for you. Now that I have the tires off, I can inspect some of the components that typically wear out. What I'm looking at right now is the U-joint right here. This is in the axle. It's like a cross piece of metal, and it allows the outer knuckle to turn as the axle rotates. And it's 2 joints, and they turn on the axle shaft, and then there's little needle bearings on top. But what can happen is in these caps, so there are these needle bearings all around that cross pattern, and they're greased. And what can happen is water can get in there and they can dry out, and then you get play in these U-joints, and then they rattle around. And so it's good to inspect these just to see if there's anything wrong with them. Again, any play, any signs of movement, because the U-joints, if they wear out, they can move around in the ears of the axle shafts. And over the years, I've replaced a lot of these stub shafts and axle shafts because I've broken U-joints, and then they wallowed out the ears of the axle shafts. And It's not fun to replace on the trail, but it's possible. So it's a good idea to, just because the tire's off right now, to inspect it to see if there's any signs of premature wear. So now I've turned the steering wheel all the way to driver, so left. And now I'm looking inside here at the U-joint, and you can see, let me zoom out here. So I've got my hand on the outer hub, and I'm turning the wheel, or I'm turning the hub, and I'm looking at how this rotates. And now, if you can see, let me zoom back in here, right there, refocus. Okay, so in here, you have these little dust caps on the underside of these U-joints, and those keep water from going inside and drying out that grease. And so what I'm looking for as I'm turning this is there any sound, any grinding, or any of those caps missing? And then as I'm looking at the top of these caps, so right here, this circle, that's the cap of the U-joint, and then this is the ear of the axle shaft. You have since this is the driver's side, this little axle shaft goes in to the diff, and then right here, you have a little stub axle shaft that goes out to the hub assembly. And so because this has to rotate, that U-joint allows that force to be transmitted from the axle and then turn. So it's kind of a really cool pivot point. And actually, let me zoom out here. And so I'm looking at this, and so what can happen sometimes is these caps can spin, or they can get pressed out. And so as I'm looking at these, I don't see any areas, where they're all flush. So that looks good. I don't see any signs of rotation, because these are all painted at the same time, so I don't see any of the paint chipped off. And then looking in at the U-joints, I can see as I rotate, each head is rotating nice and freely. Nothing looks bound up. All of the, all the gaskets are there. So this looks like a good U-joint. While this tire is off, it's a good opportunity to talk about a characteristic of U-joints when you're locked off-road. Now, your Rubicon guys, I'm sure you've noticed that when you're locked and your tires are turned all the way and you're turning, you might have kind of a hopping or a chirping noise coming from your front as your tires are kind of skidding along. Well, part of that chopping is from this U-joint right here, because when the knuckle is straight and you're turning, the ears of the outer, or the outer and the inner shafts, they can rotate evenly. But then as you turn out, that U-joint allows the outer shaft and knuckles to pivot on that joint, but then it still has to have force go through that. And so what's happening is as you're turning, as the arms of that U-joint are rotating, the force, it's uneven, the speed, so it speeds up, slows down, speeds up, slows down as those ears are turning. The way to think of it is, this is basically like a wobble bit that you use when you're working on your rig, when you have to kind of go to an off angle, bolt. So this is basically like a wobble bit, but it's in your axle and a lot of force goes through it. And so that causes some interesting characteristics. Now, you have to be careful when you're off-road. If you're really bound up and you're trying to turn, well, now you have these uneven forces going through that U-joint, and you can break that U-joint, and it is not fun to replace on the trail. So if you have to do a tight turn when you're off-road, and I recommend, unlocking your front axle, so that way you aren't putting all that stress on this U-joint. And then once you've finished your turn and you're squared back up again, lock it again. Now, that's only if you're doing like a switchback or something and you really don't need that traction. So just be careful when you are locked at full turn, because you're putting a lot of stress on that U-joint. A couple other things to check while we're here is just looking at the brakes. I can see the brake pads, and I'm just looking through, and both sides, I can see that there's plenty of pad left. I don't see any massive scoring on this brake surface. When I'm turning this, it's a nice smooth rotation, so I don't hear any grinding coming from the unit bearing inside, which on the JKs would dry out a lot if you did water crossings because they weren't sealed well. So they dry out and you get kind of some play in them from it, just drying out. But on the JLs and Gladiators, it's sealed a lot better, so it's not as big of a problem to worry about. So again, just doing just some visual inspections, looking, just making sure everything looks as it should, meaning nothing has any play in it or looks excessively worn. So everything over here looks pretty good.
Before putting the wheels on, I inspect the studs for burrs or any other debris, and I clean it out. I don't want that getting inside the lug nuts when I put them on there, which can cause them to cross thread.
Now when I put my tires back on, I don't use my Ugga Dugga gun to zip on my lug nuts. What can happen is you get little burrs on the studs, and that can strip out your lug nuts, and with the power of these things, you can put these on crooked. What I prefer to do is actually tighten these on by hand. It's a little more time consuming, and I do it in a star pattern. Just get these started, and then I slowly, just work them in by hand instead of using the impact. This way, I'm not accidentally stretching my studs. And in the past, when I've taken my Jeep to tire shops to have them do my tire rotation, what I've seen is the tire techs will take the impact and go all the way until it suffers no more. And then they'll torque it. It's like, dude, you just torqued it to like 250 foot-pounds or whatever these things will do. You're done. So I prefer to do this by hand to ensure that I'm not getting any burrs in the lug nuts and stripping anything out. Because when you're on the trail and you have to change a tire, you don't want to have to find out then that you've got a stuck lug nut or a stripped lug nut or something. So this is easier right now because the vehicle is in the air, so I can work the tire around as I tighten these. And then once the vehicle is on the ground, then I'll go back with a torque wrench and torque all these to spec.
A 5-tire rotation means you use your spare. So I pulled my spare down and put it into rotation, and then I gave one of my other tires a break. On my Gladiator, I can fit a full-size 35-inch tire with matching wheel underneath the bed.
Come on, get in there. There we go. Truck's on the ground. Now I'm torquing everything, doing a star pattern. Now on the Gladiator, the torque spec is 130 foot-pounds. So 1, now go down across, up, down here, last one. Then I go around one more time just to make sure. Now, after about 50 miles, I'll come back and re-torque all my lug nuts just to make sure in case anything's settled. There, torque to spec.
Lastly, I went around and topped off every tire to 37 psi. Keep a maintenance log of your vehicle. At every service interval, I write down the mileage, the date, and what service I performed. I also have the common tools I need to perform those services, as well as the part numbers, so I'm not having to look for that information every time. I just know what to get and what to look for to speed things up.
Next is a quick thing to check. This is the brake fluid. So this is the brake fluid reservoir, and the service manual says it recommends just whenever you do service, check the fluid. This vehicle has 40,000 miles on it. So because the brake pads, have worn a little more, the pistons have to travel a little further to clamp the brakes. And so that means the fluid level has dropped a little bit to compensate for that extra distance. Now, if this was severely down, down in here, potentially there was a leak somewhere. So for now, looking at it, so on the reservoir, there's the minimum right here. The max is right there. Fluid level is right there. I'm going to go ahead and top it off just because I'm here. And this is just DO.3 brake fluid. Let's see if I can do this. And let that bubble up. And max. Really? There we go. Got it. Now it's time for the oil change. Now I've noticed on a lot of forums people say, oh, I change my oil every 6,000 or 7,000 miles. You know, they get by, you're going for their distances. Now, in the service manual here on mine for my 2020 Gladiator, on page, let's see here. Oh, here we go. On page 318, it says, heavy duty use of vehicle. Change engine oil at 4,000 miles or 350 hours of engine runtime if the vehicle is operated in a dusty and off-road environment. So are you guys just not going off-road? You know, is that how that works? You guys can go so far without changing your oil? Personally, you know, I spend a lot of time off-road, so I change every 5,000 miles. According to this, I potentially should be changing sooner. Now I get that. That's probably assuming the vehicle spends its entire life in a dusty environment. But, you know, just because, again, I am trying to prolong the life of this vehicle, I'm fine changing it more frequently. So that's why I stick to 5,000 miles. But according to this, that might even be too long.
Oil change is simple. Pull the cap, use a 13 millimeter socket, and pull the oil drain plug. You may need to access it under a skid plate.
Who monkeyed on this last time?
Drain out all the oil. Then replace the oil filter. You'll need a 24 millimeter socket. It makes a mess, and so I immediately clamp it in the new oil filter box to keep from spilling oil in the engine bay. Replace the gasket ring with the new one that's included with the oil filter. Slide the new oil filter into the cap and then screw that by hand into the housing. Be careful tightening so you don't crack the oil filter cap. And then clean up your mess.
Now, one thing I do when I change my oil is I have this special bottle right here of oil. It's the same weight that the engine oil uses, but this one, it's called pour to clean. So what I do before I add in my 5 quarts of oil in my engine is I actually pour a little bit of this into the engine just to push out any remaining oil and just help kind of clean out anything else that's in the way. So I have this dedicated 5 quarts of pour to clean engine oil that I use before I add my actual 5 quarts. Now I wait for this to drain out before plugging the oil pan, and then I add my 5 quarts. All right, I've rinsed out a little bit of the oil that was in the engine with that pour to clean can. Now, I know there's a lot of oil still up in the engine, and that probably doesn't do much, but it makes me feel better, so I do it anyway. Now, I've plugged off the cap after that's drained, and now I'm adding my real, 0 weight 20, 5 quarts of my engine oil. Now, I get it, people have different brands they like. This is just the brand that I like, and I've used this on all my Jeeps. All right, just let that sit there a bit. Now, while I'm sitting here and while I've been topping off my oil, I have been looking around this, and I noticed that on the top of my valve covers, looks like there's oil seeping out from around the ignition coils. Now, I had that problem 20,000 miles ago and I had to replace the valve covers. So it's interesting that I'm having the same problem again. So it looks like I need to take this into the dealership to have that serviced. I don't know how severe of a problem it is, but it does bug me having that oil smell when I'm going on the trail. So I don't know how much oil that's leaking. This does look more excessive than what it was the first time I had this leak. It is frustrating that I had it fixed once and I'm dealing with it again. So maybe it's just a faulty, part or design or whatever. But anyway, so it looks like I do need to take this in to have those valve covers checked again. Bummer. And you wonder why the engine smells like oil. One thing you can do after you've changed your oil is pour it back into the original oil container to get an idea to see if your engine is burning oil. My 2007 JK with that 3.8 liter V6, that was notorious for burning oil. Once I passed 70,000 miles, I was burning a quart of oil every 1,000 miles. That's crazy. So this Jeep, now that I'm at 40,000 miles, I want to keep track, am I burning excessive oil? So I'm going to pour the oil that I just pulled out that's in this, lovely container back into here and see where it lines up with the original markings. Make sure when doing this, you use a different funnel than the one you use to fill your engine. I have this milk jug I cut in half. It's just a cheap throwaway funnel that I use for stuff like this. All right, so you can do this without making a mess. Oh yeah. All right. Let's see how we did. So this is a 5-quart oil container, and the Jeep takes 5 quarts. So this has 1, 2, 3, 4, and a quarter quarts. This does include about a quarter quart of that Porta Clean special oil that I put in. So about a quart of oil has just disappeared since my last oil change. And the vehicle has 40,000 miles. I've had some spirited driving with it. I don't know how much to expect, oil to just, how much that to burn off every 5,000 miles. But that's good to know that in 5,000 miles, I've lost about a quart of oil. And so I've only been using, 4 quarts of oil. So had I gone another, 2,000 miles before changing my oil, I might only have, 3.5 or 3 quarts of oil left in the engine. So I'm glad I saw this. So now I know, hey, every 5,000 miles, change my oil. And I'm going to track this over time to see if, if when I'm at like 60 or 70,000 miles, if this engine starts behaving like it did, or if it starts behaving like the 3.8 in my first JK and it starts burning, even more oil. So this is just a good, base point to have. All right. Next, I'm changing my transfer case fluid. Now the service interval on this, I think it's like 60,000 miles, but I know my Jeep, I've been a little aggressive with it, so I'm doing it a little premature just to make sure. So now I'm gonna pull this drain plug right here, drain out the fluid, and then right here is the fill plug. Just gonna fill that with fluid until it starts to dribble out, then it's good to go. First, we undo the top plug so air can enter when the fluid escapes. Drain plug, right here. All right, Brandon here down in wide angle land. Now, one thing I do want to mention is before you drain anything on your rig, make sure you have a way to fill it first. What I mean by that is, for example, here on this transfer case, I need a way to either pump the fluid in or have an elevated funnel that I can get fluid into. On other things, make sure you can access the fill plug, that it's not hidden up behind a firewall or something, that you know how to get to it before you drain the fluid out, before you really hose yourself. So just a little tip there. All right, that's good. Drain the fluid out. Reinstall the plug. And click. That's good. Now this is probably gonna get ugly, so you may need to turn away. All right, so I'm using ATF4. That's what you're supposed to use. It should take a little over 2 quarts of this stuff. And you just pour until it starts to dribble out. Funnel right here. Stick that in there. And this is where I make a mess of things. So I did have a hand pump, but my kids put rocks in it, so I can't use that for this. Carefully. Carefully.
beautiful. Get in there. Wow, that is everywhere. Holy crap. This is making such a mess. Holy cow. Ah, it's in my eyes. Get in there. Get in there. What the heck? This is a bad idea. This is a really bad idea. I also don't want to be knocking dirt off the top of this Jeep in there. Alright, so I have a little physics here. It's a little elevator. Oh my gosh, that is everywhere. Jeez. And I have to pour that in. Oh my gosh. What a mess. Ah, damn it. Raise that up. Yeah, this is a great idea. Oh, this is such a good idea. Got a good system here. Just add a little bit. Raise it up. Pour that into there. Whoop. Raise it up ever so gently. So now, look right there. It's starting to pour out. That's what we're going for. Pull this out. That. See, it's still draining out right here. Just making sure. It wasn't draining out much when I was putting it in, but now that that tube's out of the way, it's draining out a lot more. Should let that finish, and then I'm going to plug this up. I overachieved on that one. All right, there we go. There we go. There, that was fun. Yeah. Man, look at that. All right. Oh no, that's done. Not gonna mess to clean up. All right, give me a minute here.
Next up is the air filter. The Jeep manual says to replace this every 30,000 miles. Now, within that time, I did install this AEV snorkel on my Jeep. I didn't do this for water fording. I actually did it for air cleaning and air quality. So with the air intake right up there, that black salad bowl looking thing, that actually pulls in cleaner air than right here where the stock intake was. And that little bowl on top, that's called a pre-filter. And that does exactly what it says. It pre-filters the air. There's a little cyclone action in there that ejects larger debris in the air before it even has a chance to get to the primary air filter. So it's just a good system to have in the Jeep for like those really dusty trail days when you're unfortunately at the back of the convoy. It just helps clean all that stuff before it gets into the engine. Lift this up. Come on. There we go. Lift this up. All right. Let's see how dirty this is. All right. So let's go a little closer. So this air filter has had about 20,000 miles of air go through it, whatever measurement that means, since I've installed this snorkel with the pre-filter. And one thing I noticed right away is there's no debris on it. Like, I don't see any bugs, any little leaves or twigs or sticks or little things like that that I would usually see in a Jeep without a snorkel on it. And it's nice to see that pre-filter is actually doing its job, pre-cleaning the air. I mean, this is dirty, yeah, but I probably could have gone substantially further with this oil filter or with this air filter without having to change it. So I'm actually very impressed to see that the proof here that pre-filter is actually working. I mean, look at that. There's nothing, no bugs, no flies, nothing. It's just little fine particulates. That's so nice. Now it says the Fram 12373. Notice it has a little notch here in the corner. So that just fits right in. Like that. Slide the cover, air filter cover back in, reattach the intake hose, snap that back on, tighten. This is one of those really simple maintenance things you can do that's almost fun to do just because it's so easy. All right, that's tight. And then the 4 screws around the cover. Just that easy, just that quick. One often overlooked maintenance item on Jeeps is right here on the door hinges. The service manual says that it recommends you routinely take the doors off. So yes, it's designed to do that. Take the doors off and lubricate the touchy bits in there with white lithium grease. Now, in case you forget what size bolt this is, it's labeled right here. It says T50 or that Torx 50 bolt. So this is a pretty simple thing to do. So I'm gonna get my doors off and lube up my joints. Now, to protect the paint, I am using a little shop towel right here, just so I don't scratch the body unnecessarily, because I do enough of that on the trail. Next is the diff. Now the diffs have breathers, but just to make sure, I'm gonna open this one first. Interesting. All right, that's pretty steep if that's already leaking out. Not what I was intending, but all right. There we go. All right. Now you see that color, notice how it's not milky? That's awesome. That means that even though I've done a bunch of water crossings, that I haven't gotten water in there, that water will change the color of the fluid. All right, so looking at the drain plug, you can see there's no major metal shavings on it. That looks pretty good. Whew. That does smell kind of funky. Click. You notice anything different? Yeah, I removed the tire. Let's have some space. Space. It should take about 2 of these. Yes. Yes. Here's one.
For the diff fluid, the manual says to use 75 weight 85, but 75 weight 90 works and is more readily available.
Just gonna keep pumping till it squirts out. Just like that. Boom. Click. Okay. There's one. Let's go to the front. And done. That was 7 hours of work to do my 40,000 mile maintenance checkup on this Jeep. Now, granted, it would have taken me less time if I didn't have my camera, but I wanted to share this with you, so do give me that. And yes, I could have paid someone else to do this work on the Jeep and save me all that time, but I enjoyed this. I actually liked, getting dirty and playing with the Jeep and taking care of it. The expendables and the fluids and all that, it only cost me, $180 or something like that. So it wasn't too bad, and it's worth it to me to ensure that, that I know that things are done. Not necessarily right, but they're done. Now, I'm sure there were things along the way you saw that I might have done wrong or could have done better, and so please let me know in the comments, and so next time I can do better and others can learn from my mistakes as well. Or if there's anything you think I need to go back and fix right away, please let me know. But again, all this stuff I showed you today, that's just stuff I've learned over the years from working on my Jeeps and how to take care of them. And with this rig, again, I want to maximize the reliability. I want to ensure that this thing lasts a long time. It's a really cool vehicle, and I don't want it to break down because I didn't take care of certain components of it. Case in point, the diff fluid. I showed you the rear diff fluid when I changed that, and that fluid actually kind of smelled funky to me, a little off. Didn't have that sweet note that it usually does. And the front diff fluid, that was actually milky. And that was a good lesson for me that when I do a water crossing, I just automatically from now on, and when I get home, I'm changing the diff fluid. It's not worth it to me to risk having that fluid in there, breaking down the components. So with how cheap that fluid is, it's worth it to me in just a couple minutes to make that change. So that's something that I'm going to now incorporate into my post-wheeling trip shakedown. But anyway, so I appreciate you watching and hanging out with me here in the garage today. I had a lot of fun doing this, looking around. I have a huge mess to clean up, and I'm sure you can relate. My wife, she has dinner going on and she's waiting for me to go inside and eat, and I've got a couple hours of work to do out in the garage now, just tidying up, putting everything away. So anyway, again, thanks for hanging out, and I appreciate it, and I'll see you on the trail.